Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shills, devs, lacers, peasants, vassals, meat sacks, useful idiots. I'm a useful idiot. Welcome. And today I want to go back to, of course, the whole Syria, Iraq area again, but this time because I want to talk about this document that came out last August, the 7 pages, a Defense Intelligence Agency report, declassified report, that talks about the inevitable rise of ISIS. And the more I've looked at this document, the more important it seems to be, because it clearly outlines the fact that the United States intelligence community, and therefore the military, knew all along that this strategy that they had developed was going to lead to the Islamic State, directly to the Islamic State, and spelled out in as many words. And therefore, the fact that they knew this was going to happen, went ahead with these plans all along. And then, of course, the revelations in this document of what they did know is pretty revealing. So when you add it all up, to me, it pretty much amounts to kind of the proof that the United States created ISIS, intentionally created ISIS, intentionally fostered ISIS, intentionally supported ISIS, intentionally helped develop ISIS all along the way. Because if they were in on this document as far back as 2012, that means for the last 2 or 3 years, they have known this and worked with this blueprint in mind. Now, one could argue that the United States government, the military, is so inept, and intelligence agencies, that a document like this only saw the light of day in a few sections and was dismissed or lost in the bureaucracy. That's all possibly true, but I tend to think these insights are so specific, and the events that unfolded in that region are so specific, and that these two things correlate so much that this is a smoking gun. So anyway, let's get to this document that was revealed in August 12th. And it basically a leaked document that reveals, in coordination with the Gulf states and Turkey. So there's another thing that we've known to be true, and have certainly had several years to find out that the Gulf states and Turkey are involved in this entire process as well. So we know that's true. So anyway, the leaked document reveals that in coordination with the Gulf states and Turkey, the U.S. and West intentionally sponsored violent Islamic groups to topple the government of Assad, despite anticipating that doing so would lead to the convergence and emergence of an, quote, Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. So, first of all, interesting coincidence that they know it's going to be a, quote, Islamic State, unquote, the very name. So kind of bizarre in some respects, but also the fact that this thing would encompass Iraq and Syria. They knew all along that this would unfold and be a overlapping problem in that region. So go on to quote, to the Pentagon foresaw the likely rise of an Islamic State and a direct consequence of the strategy, but described the outcome as a strategic opportunity to isolate the Syrian regime, unquote. So, as I pointed out earlier, not only did they know that this Islamic State would unfold, but they also described it right off the bat as a strategic opportunity. So once again, we see the admittance by the United States government that ISIS was something to be used and fostered, and certainly this goes a long way in explaining how the United States has handled the rise of ISIS in both Iraq and Syria, and continues to handle the presence of ISIS in Syria, in Iraq. So it also goes on to spell out all the arms supplies going from Libya to Syria. So this is another part of this document that's fairly controversial, that should be highlighted by a lot more people, is the acknowledgement in this document all along that the United States government, the United States military, the Obama administration spelled out these arms supply routes that would go from Libya to Syria and foster this new Islamic State that would destabilize Syria and Iraq. They knew it all along, the entire picture. The report goes on to confirm that the opposition is radicalized. So this is another important point about this document is that there's no mention of any moderates. So this bullshit line about, oh, these moderates that have been there the last 3 years, they knew in 2012 that there were no moderates and that the opposition would continue to be radicalized. And it goes on to say, quote, the Salafists, the Muslim Brotherhood, and Al-Qaeda in Iraq are the major forces driving the insurgency in Syria, unquote. So in spite of 3 years of incessant bullshit and propaganda, it spells out in this document that they knew all along there was no moderate opposition, there was no Free Syrian Army, and that all along this movement was involved with the Wahhabis, the Salafists, the Muslim Brotherhood, and Al-Qaeda. And then it goes on to say, quote, the rise of the insurgency in Syria has increasingly taken a sectarian direction, attracting diverse support from Sunni powers across the region, unquote. Quote. So once again, they knew that this situation would turn into a magnet for all these jihadis and these radical elements, and they would go to the region. They knew this 3 years ago, and they let it happen. And the report spells out that they know Assad will probably survive, and that the conflict will go on and turn into a multi-layered proxy war. So they also knew that. And that's what I mean when I say, when a document covers this many specificities, that the reality of this document and its connection to the actual foreign policy is just undeniable. And once again, why I think this document is so important, and one of the most important things that's emerged about this situation, because once again, it explains a lot of seemingly conflicting agendas going on in that region. And then it goes on to say, quote, there is a possibility of establishing a declared or undeclared Salafist principality in eastern Syria, and this is exactly what the supporting powers to the opposition want in order to isolate the Syrian regime, unquote. That's about as damning as it gets. They not only knew that there would be an extreme Islamist state, but it would be declared. It would be powerful enough and official enough to actually declare a principality. Not only that it would specifically be a Salafist or Wahhabi principality. So they even knew right away that the potential for the Muslim Brotherhood and Al-Qaeda to basically commandeer the Syrian opposition was not going to happen. They knew it was going to be what has emerged as ISIS and these Salafists. So another very damning element of this, and the references to Iraq as part of this entity are also very telling. They knew it wasn't just going to be Syria, so they had foreknowledge once again that this thing would involve great swaths of Syria and Iraq, and we have that situation existing now. And it goes on that the establishment of this Salafist principality in eastern Syria would create the ideal atmosphere for Al-Qaeda in Iraq to return to its old pockets of Mosul and Ramadi, and ISIS in so-called ISIS in Iraq. And once again, here it is 3 years ago, and they already knew that these policies would lead to the establishment of ISIS and destabilization in Iraq, but even more specifically how Al-Qaeda in Iraq would morph into ISIS and return to these places like Mosul and Ramadi. They must be psychic, because here we find ISIS ultimately taking over Mosul and Ramadi. Ramadi last year, and Mosul, of course, several years ago. And so we have all these damning elements. There was never any moderate rebels. They knew that along the way. The ISIS being used as a strategic U.S. asset. The weapons train from Libya to Syria in the hub of Benghazi. Probably what they're more afraid of, having details revealed about Benghazi more than anything else, is probably just the gun running going on out of there, and what that would unravel. And then we also have the fact that this report doesn't mention anything about the troop withdrawals or the surge, or the talk of surge or premature troop withdrawals as any sort of catalyst whatsoever. So all this political posturing in the United States about ISIS as a result of policies of Obama and early withdrawals, which is a moot point anyway, because the withdrawals were already scheduled by the Bush administration and already set in place, and nobody had any problem with that. But anyway, the fact is that the timing of troop withdrawals had nothing to do with it, because 3 years ago the United States military intelligence organizations already knew how this entire story was going to unfold. And the fact that they knew that this entire story was going to unfold this way, and that it did exactly unfold that way, makes, for me, an undeniable connection between the fact that the United States actually has supported ISIS all along the way and continues to do so. And it explains almost everything. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.